Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Mary Thompson and I'm a CAAM Board member. This evening we have Chai with CAAM, which is our monthly webinar series, and tonight's presentation is entitled 6 Decades of Pioneering Research in Ayurveda and the Road Ahead. Thank you for joining us. The California Association of Ayurveda is a professional association that exists to provide a platform for the support of Ayurvedic students, teachers, and professionals in California. Webinars such as tonight's give us the opportunity to meet our community and provide useful information. Achieving our goal to provide a unified voice for the practice of Ayurveda in California, it's only possible due to the involvement and support of our members. We invite you to visit our website, ayurveda-caam.org, and read about the benefits of membership and consider becoming a vital part of this association. You have an irreplaceable role to play in the evolution of Ayurveda in California, and your voice is welcomed. Tonight, one of CAAM's board's members, Vaidya-Scientist Nami Pathak, will be hosting our webinar in a dialogue with esteemed Dr. Ashok Vaidya on the topic of 6 decades of pioneering research in Ayurveda and the road ahead. We welcome both Vaidya Nami and Dr. Ashok Vaidya here this evening. Vaidya-Scientist Nami is a CAAM board member and the chair of the Education Committee. She practices and teaches Ayurveda from her clinic, Ayu Care, in Fremont, California. She has trained extensively in both Ayurveda and biomedicine, with a consistent focus on scientific research and clinical integration of both their fundamentals. She is widely published, an adjunct deputy director of clinical research at Kasturba Health Society, and is Research Board of Council for Ayurveda Research. You can read more about Vaidya Nami by checking out her bio on the CAAM website. Welcome, Nami.
And thank you, CAAM, for putting together this event, which is very close to my heart. And I'm very happy to find the opportunity to share a glimpse of my research mentor, Dr. Ashok Vaidya, with the entire fraternity, growing fraternity of Ayurveda in the United States. I will introduce Dr. Vaidya now with the entire journey. I have more than 8 decades to cover, but I'm going to do that soon. Dr. Ashok Vaidya has an MD in General Medicine and Therapeutics and a PhD in Clinical Pharmacology with a fellowship in Clinical Pharmacology at Yale University. He hails from a family of Vaidyas and physicians. His great-grandfather, Vaidya Mayaram Sundarji, was an eminent Vaidya in Gujarat with an investigative and open mind to science. His grandfather, Dr. P.M. Vaidya, was one of the earliest sub-assistant surgeon trained at the Hyderabad Medical College. Dr. Ashok Vaidya had witnessed as a child his parents preparing and dispensing Ayurvedic medicines. Trained in India in medicine and a rich experience with Ayurveda, he landed at Yale with a Merck Fellowship in Clinical Pharmacology. At Yale, his physician mentor, Bob Levine, would say, one Ashok is equal to 50 Yale physicians. These strong roots in the clinics were the foundations for a multidimensional clinical investigations that would pursue in the following decades. He returned to India and established the first unit of clinical pharmacology in India with Professor U.K. Sheth at the foremost medical college in Mumbai, say GS Medical College. He eventually led Ciba-Geigy, which is now Novartis Research Center, as a clinical research director and regional medical director. His job there had included phase 1 to 4 clinical drug trials, ADR monitoring, training in good clinical practice, and health policy. Alongside his job, he sat with leading Vaidyas, learning from their clinical practice and sharing inputs for enhancing it. He applied his Western medical expertise, infrastructure, and research skill set, along with his lifetime, to clinically screen Ayurvedic drugs, mucinaprurients for Parkinson's disease, Arogyavardhani and Picoryza curua for viral hepatitis, Curcuma longa in cancer, Trifla gugulu for weight loss, Anicostema litorale for diabetes mellitus, Nyctanthus arboris for malaria, Sadaka indica for menorrhagia, medicinal plants for urolithiasis, Dalbergia sisu for osteoporosis, Tinospora cordifolia, and Berberis aristata in cancer. With his interdisciplinary team, he quantified the clinical effects of these plants and unearthed their potential mechanisms of action. This led to the birth of reverse pharmacology as a transdiscipline and an intersystem approach to new drug discovery. His group was awarded the ICMR's Advanced Center for Reverse Pharmacology in Traditional Medicine. It mentored top academic leaders in India as interface interdisciplinary experts in foods, medicinal plants, modern biomedicine, and Ayurveda. The pathways created from clinical lead to product development captured the minds of many academic and industry leaders, leading to advanced studies on medicinal plants. The ICMR Advanced Center then led nationwide multicentric CSIR Nimitli projects for diabetes and arthritis with intersystem applications. The integrative Ayurveda experts like Dr. Ashwini Kumar Raut, Dr. Girish Tillu, and Dr. Nutan Nabar led the Ayurveda component of these studies through the center. Products are only a part of the process of health, and the other determinants of clinical outcomes became more and more clear with the clinical studies. Dedicated dialogues with Vaidyas influencing thought processes bidirectionally led to forays in Prakriti genomics, Ayurceuticals, dynamic Ayurvedic historiography, and integrated healthcare. He felt a need to develop Vaidyas who could talk in an interface language and present unfiltered fundamentals to both sides of the dialogue. This led to the advocacy of the Vaidya-Scientist Fellowship, which was executed by a grant at the Institute of Ayurveda and Integrative Medicine in Bangalore. I was personally fortunate to be his mentee in the years leading up to the Vaidya-Scientist Fellowship and eventually being a part of the program as he laid the fertile ground for this interdisciplinary quest arising from Ayurvedic fundamentals. His current domains of interest are spontaneous regression of cancer, the role of mitochondria in cancer and neuroplasticity, reversal of aging and kayakalp, and obesity, metabolic syndrome, and diabetes mellitus, and the studies on cow products in health and disease. We will now replay a dialogue that was recorded last week on Wednesday, and Sir will be live with us for the last 15 minutes to interact. Namaste, sir. Thank you for
Namaste.
Namaste. Sir, I'm so excited to have everyone at CAAM and everyone at the California Association of Ayurvedic Medicine and the students and the practitioners of Ayurveda, which is a very growing community in the United States, which is yearning to learn more about the roots and the fundamentals of this system of medicine, and is also very attuned to the process of scientific inquiry and research. I'm very excited to have them get a glimpse of you through these few questions that have been designed. And I'm going to go straight in and not take any more of the time. And I would love to hear all the stories that you have that will inspire us to carry this mission of Ayurveda-inspired health forward. So the first question is that you conceived and implemented Ayurveda research in the 1970s when it was not on anyone's mind. Can you share how you started this and what compelled you to remain dedicated to it for the next 5 decades?
At the outset, Nami, let me greet all the ambassadors of Ayurveda and Indian knowledge systems. And you being one of the ambassadors as a Vaidya-Scientist from India. And I think your question is very valid. But as I explained to you earlier, I come from a generation of four generation of Ayurveda and medicine. As a consequence, right from childhood, there was a deep interest in Ayurveda. But what really triggered is my MD thesis dissertation, which I wrote on Bhrugu Samhita, medical aspects of Bhrugu Samhita. That time I studied Charak, Shushruta, Bhagavad, all the books on history of medicine. And I think it excited my lifelong interest in Ayurveda. But the thesis was rejected, and naturally that emboldened me more to dedicate further. So I think that's how it began. But primarily, I have shared the story with you that once I went to a cupboard which I was as a child forbidden to open, but you know how children are. I opened that and opened the pouch, and the pouch, as soon as I put my hand in it, had intense itching. Then much later I learned that these were the trichomes of Bricuna pruriens. So you can imagine a child who has been, and that each lifelong each continued in Ayurveda. So it's not 7 years each, it is 7 centuries each actually.
Oh,
7 decades each. What I mean is 7 decades each. So I feel that watching parents preparing medicines, dispensing them, patients coming at home, all that was to a child a novelty. Because I wondered what is of more interest than me? Why are they putting me by the side and interested in this kind of whatever the smelling, not very nice. And I think that that interest must have been deeply engendered. But primarily, I feel my teachers played a major role. Rustam Jal Vakil was my teacher, the discoverer of Rolfia serpentina. And he taught me cardiology. And I think that was the first beginning. Later on, as I interacted with Vaidyas and became apprenticeship of many great Vaidyas, as you know the story that more people you learn from, more you have to learn. And that Vaidya, what we call as Kulaguru Parampara, or saying Guru Parampara, Gurukul Parampara are different. And I think Gurukul Parampara needs to be revived in California. Because California is the world leader in new movements. And I'm sure that again in this movement too, my suggestion be taken up seriously by CAAM, and you can start this because there are many young Americans who want to learn Ayurveda. Thank you.
so true, sir. So true. I think this is the biggest question that I have in my mind because there are so many schools in the US now, and everyone is looking for a mentorship, and they understand the value of an apprentice model, but it is difficult to do it here. It is not natural. It's not a cultural support systems do not exist to teach Ayurveda and practice Ayurveda in the way in which it is practiced in India. So how do we do this? And that is a big question, but I'm sure that there will be a path forward, and we hope to get the right insights from you through this dialogue and further.
I think you have to evolve American Ayurveda
Yes, I think,
because I think that transplantation transculturally are not easy.
yes,
Even the American Indians had a lot of knowledge about herbs and uses of herbs, and they had tremendous practices.
right.
And the plants used in America and India are different. So you have to find equivalents. And I think that may strike the imagination of youngsters that you are evolving an American Ayurveda.
Yes, yes. Okay, I'll move on to the next question, which is that, sir, I have seen you and you have been a great team player and a leader in multiple interdisciplinary aspects of health. I have seen your style of asking questions to help experts think different, to get opened up and reflect for their own growth. What are some of the other responses that you have for the development of interdisciplinary, intersystem dialogue? Because, you know, the true integration for health, yes, it will start in the kitchens, it will start in people's individual lives. But then when they need help and they seek support, they need the right guidance, and they need experts who are oriented in a way to guide them. So how was this intersystem dialogue? Uh, how do we nurture and spur it? That's what I want to get to by your response.
Right from my early career in research, I realized the research only prospers by collaboration. And collaboration only prospers by mutual trust and mutual admiration for the expertise. And for a dialogue to strike, one has to know the unique strength of the person with whom one is striking the dialogue. And one has to really bring that out first. I learned this at Yale University more than even in India, because there we used to collaborate across disciplines far apart. And I think the results were very obvious. But I think the secret of collaboration is primarily striking dialogue on a topic of mutual interest which has some practical consequences. And that's why patient relief is the consequence each one wants.
Yes.
And sharing this in dialogue can be the starting point of intersystem communication. And Rama Madam has started this in relation to antenatal care. Now it is extended to PCOS, to menopause. And I think that this dialogue is more a foundation for future synergic practice of medicine.
That's wonderful, sir. That I think that's the heart, to be able to synergize for patient relief. And you're not synergizing for your system being better than the other. You're not synergizing for getting more people coming under one person's care or some. It's not about you. So removing the professionals from the equation is very crucial. And this is something that does not happen naturally, because, sir, people have not witnessed it. So when you witness it, you feel that you can imbibe it, but witnessing it, that's the challenge. So,
Yeah, one point, Nami, there is the epistemology of the two systems are very different.
yes,
The epistemology of Ayurveda is based on Panchamahabhuta, on Triguna and Ashtada Prakriti, the Sankhya foundation. But the modern medicine is based on molecular understanding, cell biology, all that. So what is essential is that in a single patient, if you show the response and you can explain in terms of both the epistemology, in terms of pathogenesis and its reversal, I think it will strike a chord of sympathetic chord of listening to each other first. Because the most important part in dialogue is listening, and respecting each other's epistemology is never easy, because we are all culturally idiosyncratic.
yeah,
US is one country very open-minded in that sense, and very pragmatic. That's why Swami Vivekananda succeeded there. Swami Abhedaran succeeded there. You know, Swami Yoganand succeeded there. Sachidanandji succeeded there. And Dr. Lard and many other leaders of Ayurveda have succeeded because they have struck the same chord of communication.
that's very rightly put, sir. It's amazing that you have this tab on what's happening in the US and how countries are different, and we are able to get your wisdom and your guidance on this. So I want to get down to a little bit more of the practical aspects of the research that you've developed over the last few decades. And you've developed the system of reverse, the transdiscipline of reverse pharmacology. And it was a very rational response to the crisis in drug development. It has guided many projects in India, in the pharmacy education, pharmacology departments, and also for the industry leaders. I wanted to know, how can someone from the outside, a novice in Ayurveda, access this understanding of reverse pharmacology currently? How do we engage with this work that you have done?
It's a very, very important question because in the country of its origin itself, reverse pharmacology has not been taken up to a level it should have been taken up. Whereas so many other nations in Southeast Asia, China, Britain have taken up reverse pharmacology because you are starting with experience.
Right.
So experiential evidence is your starting point and not a theory or a hypothesis. Usually our scientific training looks up first to develop a null hypothesis and say that null hypothesis doesn't hold true. Whereas clinical sciences are based on bedside to bench. So in bedside, you make an observation which is validated not only by Ayurvedic variables and criteria, but modern variables, laboratory findings, and they gel into each other, as you have seen yourself in Parkinson's disease and mucuna pruriens. Because when I presented that data to London Lord Walton Committee, Lord Walton was surprised. Oh, such work exists in India, we have no idea. So I think evidence, clinical evidence is the starting point to interest everybody. And once that starts, then mechanistic understanding what we call Shatkriya Kal, the stages of disease, which is unique to Ayurveda, and reversal. So I think one should start with bedside. That's how we started with Antarkarji. As you know, first patient was Birangi with Parkinson's. She was completely bedridden. I was trying to convince Antarkarji to use mucuna for some almost 2-3 years. He was not willing because it was not mentioned in Ayurveda.
Yeah.
Then he gave quietly mucuna prunus powder and the lady started walking. And that was an immense impact in Podar Ayurvedic College itself. So proof of the pudding is in eating. So clinical outcomes should be the starting points to convince them.
Okay. So I'm intrigued by the story a little bit more. If you can share, sir. So how did that one clinical experience then build on to you doing the clinical study of mucuna pruriens, then it getting standardized, mucuna pruriens getting standardized by Jandu to create Zandopa, which is working so well. And now there is a whole industry of mucuna pruriens for Parkinson's disease. And it's almost as if, hey, this was written in the text for thousands of years. So, that's the movement that you created for Parkinson's disease. I would love to know what is the next step after that clinical experience, what you did with Antarkarji, sir.
We had the entire team, Nami. I think first problem is, as you rightly say, sourcing itself. So we had one of the best botanists and pharmacognosist at our research center. So we collected mucuna ourselves. We standardized ourselves. We assayed the L-DOPA content. Actually, the variation was 2% to 14%. No wonder the dose response curves don't work. So we had to standardize that it was 4 to 5% of L-DOPA in the seed powder. And we also did bioavailability of L-DOPA from the seed powder. This was the first bioavailability study in Ayurveda from a crude standardized plant. So this caught the imagination and we could essay L-DOPA. So the teamwork which went behind it at Podar clinical work, at JJ Hospital, Dr. Vaidya, the eminent neurologist, and our entire team of Dr. Dr. Rajgopalan in essaying, and Dr. Joshi on his standardizing was the beginning point. Then once Dr. Parikh asked me that, because nobody had started any work on it, so he said, Dr. Vaidya, can we take up as a Jandu development? I said, of course, no one is interested. SEBA is not interested also. So he got a very major grant on that. And I would like that all our CAAM colleagues would be happy to know that this was the first plant, Ayurvedic plant underwent phase 1 trials in permission in USA. Then Bala took it up in the Midwest, and the rest is the history. Now Mucuna is available all over in the world, India, everywhere, and many patients, and double-blind trial in England has shown that it has actually advantages over even carbidopa
Yeah.
in terms of side effects and tolerability. And efficacy is also very good. We have still not worked out the alkaloids, which are indole alkaloids, which may be working on dopamine receptors. Because L-DOPA free extract also has activity. So I think a story never ends with market. I think story begins with the market.
Wonderful, sir. Wonderful. That is so inspiring. The story begins with the market. And, that really keeps everybody inspired, keeps the hustle, keeps the questioning and curiosity on. And it shows that, we are so small, we are specks in the whole process. And we become so much more by the spirit and the togetherness. Thank you for sharing that, sir. I wanted to move on a little bit into the non-product domain of Ayurveda and your research in the non-product aspects of Ayurveda. And it started, to my mind, with your work on Prakriti-based genetics in 1994, if I remember correctly. It eventually led to the development of Ayurgenomics as an entire transdisciplinary field, which still has a lot of work to be done. But can you share, how did that start?
We had a wonderful international conference at New York on Ayurveda. Deepak Chopra was one of our speakers there. Antarkarji came along, all the top people, even Trigunaji was also there, and several people. And I think it was one of the best conferences. Unfortunately, the transcript and the recordings are there, but it never got published. Like many of our conferences unpublished. At that meeting, first time I said about Prakriti genomics and Prakriti genetics, because I had a great interest in pharmacogenomics even much earlier. And actually, while studying isoniazid, I was studying the isoniazid viability, and with a single dose, the side effects I observed, I predicted that I will turn out to be the slowest acetylator. And I turned out to be slowest acetylator of isoniazid. So side effect gave me an idea that my levels were very high. So from that time on, because we had to study the P450 enzyme, the glucanations, because ultimately there are many drugs which are pro-drugs, and we have not yet even scratched the surface of Ayurvedic combinations, how they interact in terms of pharmacokinetic and metabolic interactions. So that made me that Vata, Pitta and Kapha itself may be basic in terms of pharmacogenomics. But it was not sufficient. As you rightly put, non-drug interest is much larger. And later on, Dr. Patwardhan took it up seriously, Dr. Kalpana Joshi, and they did with HLA antigens, and that was the one pioneering work they did earlier. And then Dr. Vaidya came up, Vitali Mukherjee came up, and we had a biggest program of Tisutra of CSIR where I was advisor. And in high altitude illness, it was related to Prakriti and genes. And I think they recently had a meeting and again on Prakriti, and now the nation has decided, Dr. Kotecha was there also in discussion, and he said we are going to have one form, which is the Ayusoft form, which will be nationally used, and there will be big data generated, which will be in the cloud.
Excellent.
So when anybody asks where are the data in Ayurveda, I think we'll flood them with data of thousands of patients on the cloud itself. The cloud will rain very heavily.
They'll be like, take that, take that. That would be wonderful. I think that technology, having the access to this new age technology, can be a game changer. I hope that it is a game changer, because there are a lot of ground level aspects that need to be considered when we are going to actually put in the data. And I hope that it is developed for the new age in a very collaborative setting as well. And I'm very excited for Ayusoft to get revived and be available not just for India, but also across the world. Okay, so with that, we move on to the clinical investigation aspects. And because we already did talk about the documentation and the data from the clinic, I know that we've had many long-standing conversations on the data in Ayurveda itself, and how do we develop the data collection, study the data, and the term for Ayur statistics that you had created, and Ayurvedic statistics, how it would be different. We don't have time to go into the details of it, of course, but can you please explain how is Ayurvedic statistics going to be different from the current modes of clinical data collection?
You asked a very difficult question, Nami.
Sorry.
Because probability theory and p-value are ruling the field of science. But entire probability theory was based on gambling. If you see the history of probability theory, chance, it is in gambling. And we are not gambling with Ayurveda. So our idea of truth seeking, or what we call veridical investigation, verity, was based on pramanas. So pratyaksha, apta, anumana, upamana, and yukti. These pramanas can be given rating scales also, and given in a hierarchy which we think is apta. Pratyakshamapi Pratyakshamapi alpam. Pratyaksha is less. Whereas the nirjastama aptaha, they can see far more. So we will give our own weightage. That is one aspect which is very important in Ayurvedic statistics, to give weightage to Praman and then give a total score. Next very important is what we call consensual validity, concurrent validity, and congruent validity. So validity can be consensual. All the top people who are experiencing it, experienced it, and they agree that this is what is working. You have to work hard to prove them wrong, otherwise there is a consensual validity. Concurrent validity is you compare something and you say, yes, it is working as good as this, or little less or more. So concurrent validity. congruent validity is at different levels of biological cognition, it holds true. If Rolfia works in hypertension, it also depletes catecholamine in the synapses. So, and catecholamine is responsible for hypertension. So, what matters is that something is true at all levels of biological cognition. And lastly, what is your hobby horse favorite also, and you won a prize for it also, is falsifiability. Because falsifiability offers completely different thing, and our sutras offer us immense kind of empirical content to challenge they can be falsified or not. And this based on all swans are white. But if you come across one black swan, then it is no, all are not white. So sutras have to be treated by falsifiability, and that itself will open up a completely novel approach to Ayurveda sutras.
Yes, sir. I think that this is so potent for so many different fields, and I really hope that it impacts the future of health for our children and grandchildren, and they live in a very different world because it has been changed because of this process of thinking, inquiry, implementation that can be focused on the outcomes for the patient. I move on to the next future that really does bring me on to the future. And sir, I think that this personal journey that you've had, that I have witnessed, that I've been very fortunate to witness for almost 2 decades now, I have seen you continue your journey and your mission with Ayurveda and health and medicine, despite all odds and all kinds of crises that occur personally, professionally. Your spiritual resilience is the foundation, I feel, for your consistent and dramatic influence on people who wish to rise above and beyond. I see you derive joy from your work without any expectation in return. And your mind remains agile and enthused despite the setbacks and challenges, sometimes in physical health at this age. Your mind is active. I remember with COVID, when COVID struck you in 4 weeks, you had a paper with 4 medicinal plants for COVID and how do we use them and putting everything together. Theoretically, this enthusiasm is a classical function of swasthya. What do you feel that you know about health that maybe we do not understand individually? And how can we possibly mainstream that?
I think it is the toughest question you have asked. Because personally, as Ramavedam always says, research should spell fun. And when Newton said that the whole ocean was in front of him and he was just picking up some pebbles, sometimes they call that a Newtonian humility. Genuinely, it is not. What I have done in my life is not my work. I'm only standing on the shoulders of giants. And some of the spiritual giants with whom I worked, whom in a way developed me, like Sri Nathalal Joshi, Makarand Dave, my parents, and my parents-in-law, have given to me a playful attitude towards life. And where you don't put yourself in center, but your work in center. And once that is happens, that you start enjoying, because you then surrender, and that's the point very important, that you surrender to whatever you call. You may call it cosmos, You may call it Bhagwan, you may call it God, you may not name it even. But our tiny, finite ego doesn't own whatever is done by us, but it through us. It is not done by us, it is done through us. We are mere instruments. And today we are there, tomorrow we are not there. But what matters in life is to be an instrument of supreme power. And when one senses that within oneself, immense gratitude flows, immense gratefulness. And this gratefulness, when it becomes persistent, then you will receive grace. When you receive grace, you transcend all obstacles, all problems, all vicissitudes. Insults don't look like insults. And insults may actually become stepping stone for introspection. So I think you have asked toughest question, but this cannot be mainstreamed. It's in each individual's own journey to what that person feels is the dearest inner core of their being, because God is not somewhere sitting on the throne in the heavens. He's sitting in every human heart, every human heart. And once we relate to that, something happens. What happens? People have tried innumerable words to explain, but everyone has failed. But I think that our consciousness is not a product of our brain. Brain and mind are, in a way, manifestations of consciousness, as this universe is also. And that's why macrocosm and macrocosm and Pinda Brahman Nyaya is so central that current quantum physics is also struggling to understand it. But thank you for asking the question. But I think each one has to sit down. Rama's mother, Narmada Ben, used to tell me, Ashok Bhai, besu to apne pade. आपल्याला बसावं लागतं. हमें बैठना चाहिए, आसन करना चाहिए. So asan, siddhi and breathing are doors to this higher perception and consciousness. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I think this is wonderful, and this is so needed for us and our world in which we are inhabiting and the world that we are creating. This message and this reminder and a witness to see how the manifestation of that journey can occur. That is the most crucial aspect of health and well-being. And I feel that we don't see this enough. We don't get to hear this enough. And especially in the West, we do live in a world where we are supposed to build an identity, project it, and then commit to it for the rest of your life, and that sometimes everyone wants to grow out and shed it off, but their valuation, their engagement from society comes when they uphold a certain kind of an identity, and being able to break that in using some of these processes is will be really a path forward. So thank you so much, sir, for sharing your wisdom and your time with California Association of Ayurvedic Medicine and everybody who is going to engage and see this webinar. And
I would like to just have one message for all our colleagues there, is that Ayurvedic Chikitsa is much more focused on Yukti Vyapashraya. And I think California is the right soil for Daiva Vyapashraya and Sattva Vajay to grow. And I think that universities like Stanford, Berkeley, UCLA, UCSF, there is a lot of sympathy towards these inner dimensions of healing. And we did not transplant the Indian practices straight on the American soil. We have to let them grow from American soil itself. So Sattva Jain Deva Pasha, I strongly recommend that the group focuses on that, not only theoretically, but practically by inviting people who have records of healing by these methods. Thank you very much, Nami, for giving me this great opportunity.
Thank you, sir. We are very humbled and honored to have you here with us. Namaste.
Namaste.
I am, yes, I think this morning was not right for him. It did not turn out right, but I'm here to answer questions and tell me what you thought. And yes, so right here.
Okay, if anyone has any questions that they would like to ask Vaidya Nami, please just put them into the chat. I think it's possible that their minds are a bit expanded with Dr. Vaidya's talk.
Yes, it was a lot, wasn't it?
Could I ask you, at the very end, he was talking about Ayurveda growing in California soil, which being a Californian, as many of us are, we really like that. But I wasn't clear on everything he was saying at the end there.
Yes.
Could you tell me what it was that he said? Some of it was difficult to hear.
So, well, it was, he talked about using more of the Daiva Vyapashraya and the Sattva Vijaya modes of treatment rather than Yukti Vyapashraya. And this essentially means, so, well, you know, treatment in Ayurveda is categorized into these three categories: Yukti Vyapashraya, Daiva Vyapashraya, Sattva Vijaya. Yukti Vyapashraya is what we all learn about, you know, in terms of, hey, this is the Agni, Ama, doshas, and this is what needs to be corrected, and this is out of balance, and this is how we're going to do it. So that entire scope really comes within the Yukti Vyapashraya domain of Ayurvedic Chikitsa. The other two dimensions are about the mind and the spirit. So Sattva Vijaya is Sattva Avijaya, and Sattva is the mind. So how do you control the mind? It's not really control, but it's an avijaya. So you're winning over the mind and using the mind in the right direction. So that dimension is what he suggests that we focus on. And also the other part is Daiva Vyapashraya, which is a completely different feature, which talks about the continuity of karma and its impact. And it's not just about, oh, I ate this thing wrong and therefore I'm suffering, but what we did even earlier on, the impact of that is there, that we sometimes have to endure, and suffering is a part of our journey as a spirit. For that, there are a lot of tools that Ayurveda talked about. They included chants, they included charity, they included going on for pilgrimages, they included abstaining from certain things to divert the mind in a different direction. So all of those tools also can be used, is what he wants, is what he suggested.
Wonderful. Okay, so the only question we have is, someone asked, is there a way that they could get in touch with him?
So
if they wanted to reach out to him.
Well, he does have his email ID, and I can ask if he's open to direct inputs. I'm sure he would have been very happy. Just a year ago, he would have been very happy to interact, but I think he has a health decline because of his condition, and therefore I'm not very enthusiastic in saying a complete yes, but I will, if you can write to me what you want to message, I think I will pass that on to him. That would be better. So my email ID you can send. I don't know, Mary, how do we want to do it? Or do we want to do it at CAAM, or should I?
I would give one of a CAAM
Right,
email, probably.
right. That would be nice.
Mhm.
So yes,
Would you like it to go to communications?
that would be great. That would be
Okay.
great.
So I'll put the address in here. It's communications@ayurveda-cam.
Right. And I will definitely pass it on.
That you could reach out to Nami through that, and we'll make sure that it gets directed back to Nami and then on to Dr. Vaidya.
Yes.
And then I hope you have seen some of the chats. Your questions were beautiful. It gave us a deep understanding of what he has been researching for the past 60 years. And I think it was pretty inspiring as a Californian to hear conversation about the future of Ayurveda and it growing here in California soil. That was beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mary.
As someone mentioned, Shraddha Ravani said, it's a beautiful session on science and spirituality.
Yeah.
This is Akhil Vaidya.
Hi, Dr. Vaidya.
I'm Ashok's brother, younger brother.
Oh.
And I have really enjoyed seeing him. We're hoping that he'll be able to come and answer questions, but I'm actually a molecular biologist, and I have worked with him in some collaborative work I work on malaria research, and so that is my connection with him, which still continues. So we have been, so Nami actually knows about our work together, and when we were discussing the Vaidya-Scientist initiative, I was very much there. If Nami, you may recall that when we were discussing different ways in which Vaidya-Scientist program can be started. I was really happy to see that got started. It's really wonderful.
Thank you.
It's been wonderful to see the tools and the resources and the entire discipline of parasitology that you opened up for malaria, for the work with Nyctanthus arbostris for so many years. So Sir was a collaborator. He's at the University of Drexel, and he collaborated on the plant. And malaria has been a big has been a big burden for India for a very long time as an infectious disease, and this was our foray into that. And with Sir's lab, we found how the TNF alpha, which is one of the biggest, which is a part of the cytokine storm, which occurs at the end of the, towards the end stages of the infection, when it becomes really, when it really increases, and there's a word for it, it's not coming to me right now, but that's the time when the cytokines increase, and TNF alpha is one of the key markers. There are a lot of drugs outside that they use to just reduce the TNF alpha, but we found with Nyctanthus arbostris, which is parijat, it's a beautiful plant, it brings it down like a very steep drop, which is something that was not witnessed by in many other medicinal plant modes. So that work was done at Dr. Akhil Vaidya's lab here, and he's been guiding the entire, from the clinical to the product process. Dr. Vaidya had guided. Thank you so much, sir, for coming aboard.
My pleasure. I'm really enjoyed it. Thank you for organizing this. I think Ashok Bhai really enjoyed that too. I think.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you. Nami, I do have one question here that I'd love to throw in, and it might be too great an answer for the time we have left, but let me know.
Yeah.
From Dale, he says, reverse pharmacology is a new term for me, and it tuned me into attending the webinar. And maybe other people are already familiar, but he was wondering, could you share a little bit more about what is reverse pharmacology?
Absolutely. Thank you for asking me that question, because so clinical pharmacology is the way in which modern medicine makes new drugs. It essentially starts with saying that, hey, these are all of the targets that are important in a disease, and these are the molecules that are there. These are the receptors that we need to target. So which molecule will plug into that, right? So then they have this entire library of different kinds of molecules that can go and plug into different receptors. And from that, they screen. So they start with tens of thousands, then they screen on a computer, and then they come up with some leads, then they test them in test tubes and say that, hey, it's having these effects, it's having this effect. Then they test it in safety in animal models, and then it goes into the human, human volunteers, and then actual disease condition, and it's tested for safety, effectiveness, and all of that. So that's a very long process. It's very labor intensive, it's very time intensive and resource intensive. And the proposal that Dr. Vaidya made was that we reverse this entire process. We start with what's working at the clinic, and then we go down to seeing what is the part in that that's truly active, and how do we amplify it and then create the safety in it. So, when they did the math around it, it was, billions of dollars can go down to just a few millions to develop those drug candidates, to create targeted products that can be used then in any setting. So you don't really need to only be with a Vaidya, but anybody would be able to use a naturally derived agent with a known action. So currently what happens is that you have all of these herbs that are there that, oh, this one is good for arthritis and that is good. So right now the evidence that we have is more an experience or some traditional pockets. But in this process, everything actually gets quantified with a nice story. And there are publications on it, which are more teeth and more science to it. But this is the simple version.
Thank you. And then you mentioned a software called Ayusoft. Is that something that's accessible in the US?
So Ayusoft is currently being revived, and Ayusoft is an amazing work by CDAC in Pune, and it actually puts together all of the samhitas and the classics, and it has its own ways of doing prakriti assessment and the form taking, and also it can indicate what medicines to be used. It has a search ability in the samhitas. So it's a very functional form. And this was there about 15 years ago that it was built. And I think it has not been used widely because, post software development, you need to have an entire ecosystem for support and all of that. That part was not pulled off well enough. But they are planning to revive Ayusoft right now with Dr. Kotecha's leadership. And I have some of my Vaidya-Scientist fellows who are also involved. So Dr. Girish Talu, who is also a Vaidya-Scientist, and I've been in a good touch with him, and he is involved in that project. He is currently at the Journal of Ayurveda and Integrative Medicine. And Dr. Kishore Patwardhan, who is also has a lot of work with Prakriti, he's also going to be involved in it. And I'm also involved in the email chains that are there while we are trying to revive that software that can be used by everyone.
Okay. Well, thank you. I think that's it. I want to thank you, Nami, and thank Dr. Ashok Vaidya for the presentation. I thought the conversation was fascinating. And so it's just a wonderful opportunity to hear from him, which we wouldn't have. And Ayesha, you have a question?
She seems to, you can turn on your mic and ask.
Oh, she's looking for management with Parkinson's, and it's a little broader scope, perhaps.
I have a publication on it because I was invited to write in one of the top ethnopharmacology journals to write my work on Parkinson's. So it's been summarized in the publication. So if you can look for it.